Welcome to the Israel Illuminated channel. Today we will examine the topic, why the Jewish temple must be built after the Messiah returns. Few topics stir as much passion in the world of biblical prophecy as the question of the third temple in Jerusalem. For Jews, the Temple Mount is the holiest place on earth, the location of Solomon's temple and the Second Temple. For Christians who study prophecy, the temple is also central to understanding the future events described in Scripture. Because of this, many people assume that the rebuilding of a Jewish temple must occur before the Messiah returns. However, when one carefully weighs the full testimony of Scripture, another possibility emerges. The temple may actually be built after the Messiah returns, not before. This perspective does not deny the future temple. In fact, Scripture strongly affirms it, but it suggests that the timing is later than many assume. At the same time, Scripture does allow for the possibility that an altar and sacrificial system could return to the Temple Mount under a possible sharing arrangement before the temple itself is constructed, much like what occurred during the days of Ezra. As Ezra 3:6 shows, from the first day of the 7th month they began to offer burnt offerings unto the Lord, but the foundation of the temple of the Lord was not yet laid. This precedent demonstrates that sacrificial worship could resume before a full temple structure exists. With this in mind, we can examine the broader biblical narrative and consider whether the temple itself may be constructed only after the Messiah appears. First, let's analyze the meaning of the word temple in the books of Revelation and Thessalonians. Many prophecy teachers point to Revelation 11:1 and 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4 as proof that a temple must exist before the Messiah returns. Yet the Greek word used in those passages deserves closer examination. The word translated temple is naos. Unlike another Greek word, hieron, which clearly refers to the physical stone temple complex. The Greek word naos has a broader meaning. It comes from the root naio, meaning to dwell. Thus, naos can refer to a dwelling place, sanctuary, tabernacle, shrine, or sacred space, not necessarily a completed stone building. As Revelation 11:1 states, "Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein." If naos refers simply to a holy dwelling place or sacred spot, then the passage may describe the measuring of the sacred location itself, possibly the foundation stone area on the Temple Mount, rather than a completed temple building. The altar mentioned in the passage, however, could easily be literal. As Ezra 3:6 shows, an altar and sacrifices were established before the temple foundation was laid during the Second Temple period. This historical precedent supports the possibility that an altar could exist before the temple itself. Next, let's examine the word holy place in Matthew 24. Another key prophetic passage is Matthew 24:15, where Yeshua warns about the abomination of desolation, mentioned in the book of Daniel standing in the holy place. The Greek word translated place is topos, which literally means place or location. Yeshua did not use the Greek word hieron for temple here. The emphasis is on a holy location, not necessarily a physical structure. This suggests that the holy place could refer to the sacred ground of Mount Zion or the Temple Mount itself. In that case, a future desecration could occur at the sacred site without requiring a fully built temple. Interestingly also, the word naos is also used in Acts 19:24 to describe shrines. The verse says, "A certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith which made silver shrines for Artemis, brought no small gain unto the craftsmen." Here, naos refers to a shrine, not a temple building. This linguistic detail raises an intriguing observation. Coincidentally, the Dome of the Rock itself is technically a shrine, not a mosque. Historically, it even had a silver appearance before the modern golden dome. Thus, some prophetic passages may simply refer to activity surrounding the sacred site, rather than a completed temple. Next, the prophecy of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel. 38-39 describes a massive invasion of Israel. Yet the motivation for this invasion is explicitly stated as economic gain, not religious hostility toward a temple. Ezekiel 38:12 explains the purpose of the invasion: to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited, a people that have gotten cattle and goods that dwell in the midst of the land. The invading nations are drawn by wealth, livestock, and goods, not by a desire to seize a temple. If a temple already stood on the Temple Mount, it would likely become a major focus of the conflict. Instead, the prophecy emphasizes economic plunder. This absence suggests the temple may not yet exist during the Gog and Magog war. Next, we will examine the future gathering on Mount Zion by Yeshua. Revelation 14:1 describes a remarkable scene. And I looked, and lo, I saw Yeshua standing on Mount Zion, and with him the 144,000 of the tribes of Israel. Notably, the passage mentions Mount Zion in Jerusalem, not the temple. The gathering is centered on the location itself rather than a temple structure. This could indicate that the 12 tribes of Israel are gathered to Mount Zion before the temple is built, possibly preparing for its construction afterward by Yeshua and the 12 tribes. Next, let's see how all the stones of the temple must fall before the coming of the Messiah. Yeshua made a striking prophecy in Matthew 24:2. There shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. While the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD fulfilled much of this prophecy, the temple platform itself, the massive retaining walls built by Herod, still remains. The western wall and other portions of the platform stand today. If Yeshua's words are taken literally, every stone associated with the temple complex must ultimately fall. This has not yet fully occurred before his second coming. Ezekiel 38:19-20 also describes a massive earthquake during the Gog and Magog war. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. Every wall shall fall to the ground. Such a catastrophic earthquake could bring down the remaining stones of the Temple Mount platform, completing Yeshua's prophecy. Next, we will examine Daniel's sanctuary in the Old Testament. The book of Daniel also describes the desecration of the sanctuary by a future adversary referred to by Yeshua. The Hebrew terms used include mikdash, or sanctuary, and codes, or holy place. These terms emphasize sacred space, not necessarily a temple building. The focus is again on holiness and location rather than architecture. Thus, the prophecy could refer to a desecration of the holy site itself. Next, we must examine the Jewish expectation of a messianic temple. Interestingly, the traditional Jewish expectation aligns with the idea that the temple will be built after the Messiah comes. The medieval Jewish scholar Maimonides, in Mishnah Torah in Kings and Wars 11:1-4, states that the Messiah will restore Israel and build the temple. If this interpretation reflects mainstream Jewish thought, it suggests that many Jews themselves expect the temple to appear during the Messianic age, not before. Next, we will see how the Messiah builds the temple. The prophet Zechariah gives a direct statement about the Messiah. Zechariah 6:13 declares, "Even he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear the glory, and shall sit and rule upon his throne." This verse explicitly attributes the building of the temple to the Messiah himself. If taken literally, this suggests the temple is constructed after his arrival, not beforehand. Furthermore, Zechariah 14:4 describes the Messiah's dramatic return. "His feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof." This massive geological event splits the Mount of Olives in two. Because the Mount of Olives stands directly across from the Temple Mount, such a cataclysm would likely shake the entire area. Revelation 6:12 also describes a great earthquake. "There was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth." The kings of the earth respond in terror. "Hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne." If global earthquakes accompany the events surrounding the Messiah's return, any structures built beforehand could easily be destroyed. If such earthquakes accompanied the Messiah's arrival, constructing a temple beforehand would seem impractical. Next, let's examine the earthquake of the Gog and Magog War. Again, Ezekiel 38:19-20 describes another devastating earthquake. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel. All the men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake, and every wall shall fall. If every wall in Israel collapses, structures on the Temple Mount would certainly be affected. This raises the possibility that the current Dome of the Rock could be destroyed during this upheaval. After this war and earthquake, Ezekiel immediately transitions to the temple vision, beginning in Ezekiel 40. The structure of Ezekiel's prophecy is important. Chapters 36 to 39 describe Israel's restoration and the defeat of Gog and Magog. Only after these events does Ezekiel receive the detailed vision of the future temple in chapters 40 to 48. Although Ezekiel 37 mentions a sanctuary and not a temple among Israel, the detailed temple description appears only after the war narrative. This sequence strongly suggests that the temple vision belongs to the post-war era. Next, let's unpack how God will reveal himself to the nations in the future. Ezekiel 38-23 describes the purpose of the Gog and Magog war. Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations. After witnessing God's power, the nations will recognize his greatness. In such a climate, humanity will finally know God and will willingly support the construction of God's temple and not out of warfare. Next, we will examine how the temples were historically built through diplomacy. History also provides an important pattern. The previous temples were not built through war or conquest, but through diplomatic agreements. Solomon's temple was built with the cooperation of Hiram, king of Tyre, shown in 1 Kings 5:1-12. The second temple was authorized through a series of royal decrees by Persian rulers: King Cyrus in Ezra 1, King Darius in Ezra 6, King Artaxerxes in Ezra 7, and Artaxerxes again for Jerusalem's walls in Nehemiah 2. These were diplomatic and political permissions, not military seizures. Today, the Temple Mount is under Islamic control, and currently the diplomatic and political measures are simply not there. After a dramatic divine intervention like the Gog and Magog War, such diplomatic support might become possible again. Even King David himself did not build the temple. God told him in 1 Chronicles 22:8, "You have shed much blood. You shall not build a house unto my name." Instead, David purchased the temple site from Araunah the Jebusite in 2 Samuel 24:18-25. He refused to take the land by force, saying, "Neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which costs me nothing." This historical precedent reinforces the principle that God's temple is established through peaceful means and not violence. History also records that the Dome of the Rock itself has repeatedly suffered earthquake damage. Major earthquakes damaged or destroyed it in 808, 846, 1015, and 1033 AD. The structure has been rebuilt and reinforced multiple times. Given Israel's location along the Dead Sea transform fault system, future earthquakes remain a real possibility and could happen the same way again. When the full weight of Scripture is considered, a compelling case emerges that the future temple may be constructed after the Messiah returns rather than before. The biblical narrative includes earthquakes, divine judgment, global upheaval, and the dramatic revelation of God to the nations. Only after these events does Scripture present the vision of the temple in Ezekiel. In the meantime, the possibility remains that an altar and sacrificial worship could return before the temple itself under a possible sharing arrangement, just as occurred in the days of Ezra. Rather than rushing into conflict over the Temple Mount, believers may do well to recognize that the ultimate temple will appear in God's perfect timing, built under the authority of the Messiah himself. Thank you for watching the Israel Illuminated channel. If you like our channel, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.